So this video is claiming that it was actually the British Empire that was the biggest losers during World War II.
Even though Hitler's the one that lost World War II,
Obviously.
Britain might have been the biggest loser of all. After World War II ended, America became a global superpower with an economy larger than all other powers combined.
Yes.
The Soviet Union, despite massive casualties, expanded into Eastern Europe and became the other superpower. Even China got a permanent UN Security Council seat and later annexed Tibet in 1951, and Axis powers like Germany and Japan, they were rebuilt as economic powerhouses. But Britain lost everything that made it great. The empire that controlled a quarter of the world's population collapsed within decades. And the worst part is, Britain was drowning in debt, so broke that they needed a massive $3.75 billion American bailout just to avoid bankruptcy.
Perfect song. So you gotta consider where the British started World War II versus how they left it. They were pretty much the #1 nation on Earth for like almost 200 years there at least. In my personal opinion, after the end of the 7 Years' War, that was when they solidified their power, which was like the 1760s, and they remained on top for so long. And I think the main reason why people forget this is because it's not like they lost their entire empire immediately in 1945, which was the end of World War II. They lost most of their colonies in Africa in the 1950s and 60s. They then lost a lot of their New World colonies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, sometimes even the 80s. But the crown jewel of them all, South Asia, they lost India and Pakistan at the same time, 1947, then Sri Lanka a year after that. But as you can see, it wasn't right away. It wasn't right when the Germans fell.
After World War II ended, America became a global superpower with an economy larger than all other powers combined.
That's the thing. I mean, the British kind of ceded their #1 spot to us, their son, the USA, and we kind of just got lucky. I mean, we weren't really damaged at all by the war. Meanwhile, London, on the other hand, it looked like this. It was definitely not pretty.
The Soviet Union, despite massive casualties, expanded into Eastern Europe and became the other superpower.
Yes, I mean, that's how the Cold War started. USA, Soviet Union, they're like 1 and 2. They start competing. Meanwhile, the British kind of got left in the dust back with France. Oh, France.
Then China got a permanent UN Security Council seat and later annexed Tibet in 1951.
Tibet was probably not happy about that, but again, I mean, I wouldn't say that China was immediately stronger than the British Empire after World War II, but I mean, they got something. What did the British get out of World War II? Because remember, throughout most of the 19th and 20th century, their whole plan was just to maintain the balance of power. And they wanted to do that because they were #1. Of course, they want to maintain the current balance of power. And funny enough, they did do that after World War II, so they kind of got what they wanted, but not really. I mean, that's kind of a whole separate conversation. Did they maintain the balance of power? I mean, yes, the West, the Allies won, but at what cost?
And Axis powers like Germany and Japan, they were rebuilt as economic powerhouses. But Britain lost everything that made it great. The empire that controlled a quarter of the world's population.
I mean, Britain was also kind of rebuilt as an economic powerhouse in a way. I mean, Germany and Japan today in 2025 are a bit more economically powerful than Britain is. But there's a lot of different explanations for that.
Population collapsed within decades. And the worst part is, Britain was drowning in debt, so broke that they needed a massive $3.75 billion American bailout just to avoid bankruptcy.
The Marshall Plan. Yeah, we were throwing around money all over the place after World War II. The USA was. Another great example, the British pound was also the reserve currency of the world, but after World War II, it was replaced by the US dollar. At least America gave money to their dad. But the final nail in the coffin for the British Empire and the French wouldn't happen until the Suez Crisis of the 1950s, which led to international humiliation for the British. Yeah, those European empires just weren't as significant anymore, and everyone in the world saw that then. What puts it best into perspective for me is by 1952, this German, I'm not going to say that word, was in full swing while Great Britain had food rationing until 1954. P. Britain, win the war, lose your empire. I mean, hey, a dub's a dub, right? You could argue they kind of knew this was inevitable when they stood alone in Europe. America, before they joined in 1941, they're like, hey, we'll help you out secretly or even publicly, but we're going to have some problems and talks later. They was just trying to stay alive. I mean, again, like I said, just look at the current world's biggest economies here in 2025. It's the US, it's China, it's Germany in 3rd. This has India in 4th, Japan in 5th, and here's the UK all the way down here in 6th. Again, Germany, Japan, Axis members. Yet 70 years later, the UK's economy not as strong. Imagine asking your former colony for money. Guys, I didn't mean to start a war, bro. Rip.
During World War II, after crushing France, Hitler offered Churchill peace, but got rejected. But what if Churchill had accepted it? Hitler's terms were surprisingly generous. Britain keeps its empire, Germany withdraws from Western Europe, and Poland gets nominal independence. All Hitler wanted was a free hand in Eastern Europe. If Britain accepts, Hitler could focus everything on the Soviet Union without a second front. He'd probably push deeper into Russia and take Moscow. Meanwhile, with no British resistance, America stays neutral longer, and the Holocaust proceeds unchecked. But Hitler would have still eventually lost to the USSR's massive resources, and knowing his track record, he would have broken the deal with Britain anyway.
Was that what they were worried about? All right, there's a lot going on here. So yeah, it is true that Hitler tried to be just a chill guy in the eyes of the British, and he did try to peace out with them before his invasion of the Soviet Union. This was a really funny point though. The British would get to keep their empire, which in our timeline, they did not. They might have thought they did right in the beginning of the end of World War II, but that's not how it ended up playing out. But yeah, the Germans really did want to expand that living space and take over all of the Soviet Union. Now this makes me think of two things. Obviously you could do a ton of research at this time. I forgot exactly what month it was that the British Parliament was closest to possibly accepting this sort of white peace with the Germans. Okay, so apparently it was May 1940. Okay, this was officially when they stood alone. No USA, no Soviet Union for help. Their buddy France just got taken out. Funny enough, whether you believe that the British were afraid that the Germans were going to take over the USSR or vice versa, if you think the British knew the USSR would ultimately win a fight against Hitler during World War II and then they would take over all of Germany, that still doesn't stop their number one concern, which I said earlier, maintaining the balance of power. Because this is interesting. This video is claiming that the Germans would still lose to the Soviet Union even if it was just 1v1. That's a tough one. Are we assuming the Americans would not supply the Soviets with a bunch of, military equipment? Regardless, they obviously said no to the peace deal and they remained in the war and they ultimately got the dub. But it is interesting, like I said, they could have peaced out theoretically and kept their empire, but probably not. They were probably still going to lose it no matter what. Keep in mind how many times Hitler duped the Europeans. Multiple times with the Partition of Austria. Obviously, this infamous photo, the peace in Europe for Czechoslovakia. The Germans just kept taking land and kept taking land and kept taking land until they realized, the Brits and the French, hey, we got to go to war with these guys because we can't believe them anymore. We can't trust them. So yeah, that means you probably couldn't trust them for this peace deal either. Who knows how long that thing would even last. I'm sure the Germans would love to backstab you at some point when the British had their pants down. I don't know why I had to describe it like that, pants down. This comment is arguing, bro, he was right outside Moscow. I don't think they would have lost. I knew that was going to be the number one most hotly contested topic of this video. The USSR glaze in this video is wild. Literally no one's talking about the video. It's just talking about, that stuff. Germany was most definitely not a chill guy.
Why did Spain stay out of both world wars? In World War I, Spain was broke after losing to America in 1898. The country had lost its remaining colonies and was in no shape to fight a major war. So King Alfonso XIII saw an opportunity and stayed neutral while selling supplies to both sides. And in World War II, Franco had just won a brutal civil war with Nazi help, but Spain was destroyed. When Hitler wanted Franco to join, Franco made outrageous demands. Gibraltar, French Morocco, tons of aid, and basically all of North Africa.
I don't think those are the most insane demands. For them to get back Gibraltar and old Morocco, they used to have Morocco. I don't know if they wanted all of North Africa. The problem would, more be Italy. Italy would be having an issue with that since they had Libya.
Hitler basically said, nah, and walked away. But Franco declared Spain non-belligerent. Instead of neutral, it helped Germany just enough to avoid invasion, but never committing to actually fight.
Yeah, remember they were, a fascist power at the time. Franco was helped by Hitler. Obviously if he was going to join his side, it was definitely going to be the Axis. I don't think this video covers enough that also the Germans were concerned that if Spain did join in, helped out the Axis, this would be even more coastline they'd have to protect from the US and UK. Look, they knew D-Day was coming. They knew there was going to be a massive, amphibious invasion that was going to happen somewhere, so they created a massive wall from France to Norway. And they worried that if Spain was also involved, they'd have to extend this wall and they'd have to let the Spanish defend their own lands. And honestly, the Germans just didn't think they'd be able to actually do that. The truth is, just like London, Spain was also just completely destroyed, and it was also very obvious to the Germans this point as well. I think ultimately, even if the Spanish did join the Axis, this probably just would have been even more of a liability that, the Germans were going to have to go and protect the Iberian Peninsula now, just like they had to protect the Italian Peninsula. To the World War I point, yes, remember the Spanish-American War? That was really the final death blow to the Spanish Empire, but they were really on their last leg for a while there. I honestly like to say the Spanish Empire was kind of like the Ottoman Empire in the sense that they were the other dying man of Europe. Once they lost those Spanish colonies, they weren't able to recover. I mean, you could go back further than that. Once they lost like the Spanish Armada, that was a beginning point. I mean, that was still in the very, very beginning, but it's a precursor. Basically, Spain's World War I, Spanish-American War, Spain's World War II, Spanish Civil War. No, that's fake. Franco could have joined, but they asked for French Morocco, Gibraltar, and parts of Cameroon. There was no outrageous demands. I think that's probably right. Spain had lost its colonies, Equatorial Guinea. If we stay extra quiet, no one will remember we exist.
Why was Austria split into 4 different parts after World War II? After Germany got carved up, so did Austria, because it was a part of Germany since the Anschluss in 1938.
This is a good question.
Even though Austrians were like, we were the first victims, just like I tried to tell my dad about what my uncle did to me, but nobody really bought that. The Allies didn't trust each other, so they each grabbed a slice. The Americans took the north, Salzburg and Upper Austria. The British got the south, Styria and Carinthia. France got a small slice in the west, Tyrol and Vorarlberg, and the Soviets took the east, including Lower Austria and Burgenland. Vienna itself was awkwardly split into 4 too.
Just like Berlin, crazy.
4 roommates sharing one bed. They all stayed until 1955, when Austria swore to stay neutral.
Worked out a lot better for Austria than it did Germany. Germany remained split, West Germany and East Germany, for a lot longer than just that. What I wish the video highlighted more is how the occupied areas of Austria kind of coincided with the occupied areas of Germany as well. The side of Austria the Americans decided to occupy perfectly bordered the Bavaria US zone as well in Germany. Also look at that connection with the French zone. The only person that kind of got screwed, but it's fine, is the British zone. They were pretty far away. Soviets pretty much had puppets all over here anyways, so again, didn't need to necessarily connect. But yes, when looking at just any old map from World War II, you might be surprised to come to find out that Germany and Austria were 2 different countries up until really right before World War II. He talked about the Anschluss of Austria. And of course, the Allies were not down to just let Germany keep all that territory. Of course, they was going to break apart that, because, yeah, they cannot have that. I see you, buddy, says the British. What's kind of funny, though, is when it did happen, when Germany did just annex Austria outright, nobody protested it. Well, nobody except for Mexico, but US, France, the UK, everyone was just like, that's cool, bro. Makes sense to me. Why did, France get anything? Maya thinking it was Syria when he said Styria. Yeah, a little bit of a difference there, I would say.
How did Germany get so strong after losing World War I? After Germany lost in 1918, its military was destroyed. But here's
why specifically that emoji? Okay, I'm not complaining about Megamind though.
But here's the twist. Germany never really demilitarized. They secretly trained with the Soviets and Russia, developed banned weapons, and prepared military plans. The Treaty of Versailles looked good on paper, but enforcement was weak. When the Nazis took power in 1933, they launched history's greatest jobs program, but it was actually just disguised rearmament, building highways,
tanks,
military supply routes,
lots of
making
tanks,
agricultural tractors. They were tanks, aircraft research, building an air force from scratch. Hitler spent $14 billion on rearmament, which was almost the entire national income. By 1939, unemployment was eliminated, and Germany had one of the world's most powerful militaries.
Just like that, that's pretty fast. It's key to remember that it was 15 years after the end of World War I when the Nazis took power in Germany, so the French and the British, they weren't really worried about them anymore. They had much bigger worries with the Great Depression. Not to mention, keep in mind, we kind of talked about appeasement. The Allies really didn't want another world war. They did everything in their power to avoid a world war, and the Mustache Man was just not going to let him do that. Yes, he was a silly Billy. Don't forget, they also did a very good job of experimenting with new military doctrines at the time. They wanted to make sure a possible World War II was not going to be fought like a World War I. No more of this trench warfare BS. They were going to make moves, and it was going to be extremely quick. One final note, I think it helped a lot that pretty much no one else in Europe was doing that at this time. The Germans were the only ones that were really focused in on military because the French, the UK, even other surrounding nations, they were just like, they just didn't want to even think about war. Again, everyone was a lot more concerned with the Great Depression at that time. I mean, damn, they was out here trying to sell kids and stuff. That's how bad it got. When you got humiliated and felt ashamed, you will take revenge. You will do anything to get it. This is what Germany did. Well, yeah, they didn't care the costs.
How did the Vietnam War actually start?
Oh,
In 1858,
it's a long story.
France invaded Vietnam to create French Indochina, which took over 30 years to completely take over the country. And by 1887, Vietnam became a part of French Indochina,
with
but
Cambodia and
resistance
Laos.
movements kept growing underground. Then in World War II, Japan occupied French Indochina, and a communist revolutionary named Ho Chi Minh formed the Viet Minh to fight the Japanese that America helped arm and train for war. After Japan surrendered, Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnamese independence, but France wanted its colony back and invaded
they wasn't
in
gonna have that.
1946, which after 8 years of
You'll notice the theme. Well, that's an interesting video to play at the same time. You'll notice the theme here. After World War II, nobody wanted to just go back to being a colony, whether you were formerly a British colony or a French.
ended with France's humiliating defeat, but this resulted in Vietnam being temporarily divided into two parts.
Yep.
But when reunification elections were canceled, it caused the Vietnam War.
America came over there, learned the hard way that France and Japan both knew, like, don't mess with Vietnam. Technically, even China knew that. Don't mess with Vietnam. I mean, this sounds insane. We don't talk about it enough. They even beat the Mongolian Empire. There's a reason why maps don't show the Mongol horde reaching at all into modern-day Vietnam. Nobody can defeat them. Vietnam, after defeating China, France, and the USA. That last video was a perfect reminder. If you love Vietnam, check out those plushies down below at makeshift.com. They are almost gone. Time is running out. Thank you to my patrons this month. Drew seems like the kind of guy who never loses the remote. Drew's Argentinian Trust Fund, Rip Grandpa. Drew Supremacy League, Alexander the Terrible, Carmel S, Connor Pavlik, Douche Baggins, Frederick Tiblin, King, Bear Hayes, Luxembourg Lover, Miglu, The Goat, Nolan, Nord Tyrol, and Tambrin.